Most detectives look for clues under the harsh light of day, hunting for fingerprints on glass and footprints in mud. I've learned the real secrets, the ones that truly matter, only surface in the deep quiet of the night. My name is Miles Corbin, and I'm a detective in a town so peaceful it seems to be holding its breath. But for the last month, something has been exhaling into our quiet world. A thief, but not an ordinary one. This thief ignores the cash on the counter and the laptops on the table. They steal memories, ghosts of things. From one house, a single bronzed baby shoe. From another, a dried flower pressed between the pages of a book. Last week, it was a music box that no longer played. The crimes were silent, precise, and deeply strange. The local papers called him the Magpie, a collector of sentimental trinkets. There were no leads, except for one thin, circumstantial thread. Every single burglary happened next door to the same house, the house of Samuel Aris. He was a quiet man, a reclusive artist who kept to himself, and, as his neighbors loved to gossip, a chronic sleepwalker. We'd questioned him, of course. He was polite, confused, and knew nothing. He was a dead end, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The pattern was too perfect. He was at the center of this web, whether he knew it or not. So I did something unorthodox. I got a warrant for a different kind of surveillance. Not of his calls, but of his sleep. I placed a small, motion-activated camera on the bookshelf in his bedroom, aimed towards his bed. That night, I sat in my unmarked car across the street, the camera feed glowing softly on my laptop beside me. For hours, there was nothing but the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. The street was silent. The world was asleep. I was about to give up, to write it off as a waste of time. And then, at 2:17 a.m., he sat up. His movements were slow, fluid, and deeply unsettling. His eyes were open, but glassy and unfocused. He was dreaming on his feet. He didn't leave the house. Instead, he drifted silently through the rooms and out the back door into his moonlit garden. My camera couldn't see the garden well, so I watched with a pair of binoculars, my heart suddenly pounding. He began to gather things: a handful of fallen leaves, a few smooth gray stones, a piece of string from the fence post. He knelt on the damp grass, his hands moving with an unnerving precision, like a sculptor deep in his work. He arranged the leaves, balanced the stones, and wrapped the string around them. He was building something. For nearly an hour he worked, a silent, dreaming artist under the pale light of the moon. Then, just as silently as he began, he stopped. He stood up, looked at his creation for a long, blank moment, and returned to his bed. I sat in my car, the silence of the street feeling heavier than before. What had I just witnessed? I waited until the sun rose and I saw Samuel leave for his job at the local library. Then, I went to see his creation. I slipped into the backyard. There on the grass was a small, strange sculpture made of leaves, twigs, and stones. It was an intricate, abstract thing of beauty, but it meant nothing to me. I felt a pang of disappointment. My grand theory, my late-night stakeout, had yielded nothing but a pile of organized garden debris. I was about to leave when my police radio crackled to life. A call came in, another Magpie burglary overnight. The address was the house right next door. The homeowner was a frantic woman, reporting one stolen item. "It was my grandmother's," she cried over the radio. A small, antique silver locket, shaped like a heart. My blood went cold. I looked down at the sculpture on the grass. The twigs formed a perfect heart shape. The leaves were arranged like an intricate floral pattern on its surface, and in the center was a single, smooth, gray stone. It wasn't abstract. It was a perfect, haunting replica of the locket that had just been stolen. He wasn't the thief. He was the oracle. I stared at the locket made of leaves and stone, then back at my own shaking hands. This changed everything. This was no longer a simple burglary case. It was a conversation with the subconscious of the entire town. And Samuel Aris, the quiet, dreaming artist, was the unwilling telephone line. I knew I couldn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? My career would be over. But more importantly, it would put Samuel in danger. What would they do to a man who could psychically channel crime scenes in his sleep? He would become a specimen, a tool. No, this was my secret now. My investigation. My duty was to interpret the clues and to protect the oracle. I upgraded my surveillance. I installed a second, high-resolution night vision camera in his garden, hidden in a birdhouse. I needed to see his work clearly. I spent the next day feeling a strange mix of dread and electric anticipation. I was waiting for the sun to go down. I was waiting for my witness to fall asleep. The night was clear and moonless. At 2:34 a.m., the motion sensor alerted my laptop. Samuel was moving. He drifted into the garden again, his movements just as fluid and serene as before. He seemed at peace in his dreaming state. This time, he ignored the leaves and twigs. He gathered different materials from the edges of his property. A handful of rusty nails from a rotting fence post, a long black piece of thread caught on a rose bush, a sharp shard of broken bottle glass. He brought them to the center of the lawn and began to work. His fingers moved with delicate, unnerving confidence. He arranged the nails in a starburst pattern. He placed the shard of glass in the center, glinting in the camera's infrared light. He then carefully wound the black thread around the head of each nail, creating a complex, spiderweb-like pattern. The final creation was stark and beautiful in a severe, unsettling way. It looked like a broken star or a trap. He returned to his bed, leaving his strange offering on the lawn. I saved the footage and waited for the morning's inevitable call. It came at 8:15 a.m. An elderly man, a decorated war veteran, reported a break-in. The thief had taken one thing: a tarnished silver medal for valor awarded to him half a century ago. I went to the scene, my heart pounding. The veteran was heartbroken. "It wasn't worth anything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it was all I had left of my boys." I returned to my office and pulled up the photo of Samuel's sculpture, a starburst of nails and a shard of glass. It looked nothing like a medal. I felt a surge of frustration. Was it just a coincidence after all? Was I seeing patterns where there were none? I sat there for an hour, staring at the two images side by side on my screen, the sculpture and the stolen medal. And then I understood. My mistake was thinking literally. Samuel wasn't replicating the object. He was replicating its story. The starburst of rusty nails wasn't the shape of the medal. It was the shrapnel from the explosion he survived. The shard of glass was the pain of his injury. And the black thread, it was the tattered ribbon the medal had once hung from. This changed the investigation completely. The thief wasn't just stealing objects. They were stealing powerful, emotional memories. The baby shoe of a firstborn child, the locket from a lost love, the medal for a sacrifice in war. This wasn't random. It was a ritual. The magpie wasn't a thief. They were a collector of something far more precious than jewels. For 2 more weeks, the pattern continued. Each night, Samuel would build a new, haunting sculpture in his sleep. Each morning, a new report of a stolen memory, a faded love letter, a child's drawing, a single petrified rose. I learned to read Samuel's art. I began to understand the language of his dreams, but I was no closer to finding the thief. and I started to notice something else. Samuel was looking tired. There were dark circles under his eyes. He moved slower. He was still polite and quiet when I saw him, but he seemed diminished, faded, as if this nightly psychic broadcast was draining him. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This process, whatever it was taking a toll on him. It was consuming him. That night, he built his most elaborate sculpture yet. It was a beautiful, terrifying cage made of thorny branches, and inside it, he placed a single, small feather. I stared at the image on my laptop, a cold dread creeping into my heart. I knew that time was running out. I had to solve this now, not just to stop the thief, but to save the Sleepwalker. I stared at the image on my laptop. The cage of thorns, the single, fragile feather inside. It was his most complex creation yet. And it wasn't a replica of a stolen object. The magpie hadn't taken anything last night. I checked the logs, no reports. This was different. This wasn't a clue. It was a message, sent directly to me from Samuel's dreaming mind. The cage of thorns was his pain, the agony of this nightly process. And the feather was his soul, fragile and trapped inside. He was telling me he was in danger. I looked at the stolen items list again. A baby shoe, a locket, a medal, a rose. They were all anchors to the past, objects saturated with love, grief, and memory. The magpie wasn't a thief. They were a ghost. A ghost feeding on the emotions of others. But whose? I scanned the neighborhood records again, looking for a nexus of this strange sorrow. I was looking for someone defined by loss, and I found her, an elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, a retired historian. Her husband had died a year ago. She lived alone at the very edge of the neighborhood, in a house that was always quiet. I had no warrant, no proof, just a wild, impossible theory born from a sleepwalker's art. I drove to her house that afternoon. It was a beautiful, old home, but the garden was perfectly, unnaturally preserved. Nothing grew, but nothing died. She opened the door before I could knock. She was a small, frail woman with eyes that held a vast, ancient sadness. "I was wondering when you'd come, Detective," she said softly. She led me inside. Her living room was a shrine. On the floor, in a massive, intricate circle around a single armchair, were all the stolen items. The baby shoe, the locket, the medal, the dried rose. They weren't trophies. They were a fortress. "When my Robert died," she began, her voice trembling, "I started to forget him. The little things, the sound of his laugh. The grief was so strong. It was erasing him," she whispered. "And I found I could reach out with my mind to things that held strong memories for others. I didn't want to cause pain," she cried softly. "I just needed their memories to build a wall around my own, to keep him safe from being forgotten." She was the magpie. Her grief had turned her into a psychic thief. But what about Samuel? "The young man next door?" she said, looking confused. "I don't know him, but sometimes, when I reach out, I feel a mind nearby. A quiet, gentle, sleeping mind. It resonates. It seems to echo what I'm doing. I didn't know I was hurting him. I understood. Samuel wasn't a psychic. He was a psychic antenna, an innocent bystander whose sensitive mind was picking up the echoes of her grief. This wasn't a case for handcuffs. This was a tragedy born of love and loneliness. There was no monster here, just a broken heart. "You don't have to steal their memories, Mrs. Gable," I said quietly. "You just need one person to share yours with." And so that became our arrangement. I didn't arrest her. She returned every single item to its owner with an anonymous apology. And once a week, I come to this quiet house and I sit in the armchair opposite her. And she tells me stories about Robert. I listen. I bear witness. I help her keep his memory alive. And since that day, Samuel Eris has slept peacefully through the night. My job is strange. I am a detective, but the crimes I solve are of the heart, and the clues are made of sorrow. It makes you wonder. Everyone around you is a living library of stories, of joys and sorrows you can never truly know. How many of them just need someone to listen, to bear witness to their own quiet, personal history before it fades away? If you believe every story deserves a witness, leave a like. It's a quiet signal that you're out there, listening. And subscribe, so we can continue to listen to the whispers together and make sure no story is ever truly lost.